Hey, Fadi.
Oh, hey Sam.
Why, Habibi?
Good, thanks.
That's good. Give me 1 second. What do I need?
Sam, I'm actually concerned. I actually got in before you because when I put in the code, it actually let me in. So I'm
Yeah.
just concerned.
Why
Shouldn't
is
I be the
that?
host? Shouldn't I be the host?
No, I set up this meeting so people can join without the host.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the settings.
Cool.
So rather than people waiting, you can come straight in.
Nice.
It makes it easier, yeah?
Clever idea.
Hey, Veronica, how are you, Baba?
Hello, how are you?
Good.
How's your week?
It's
How's
been
everyone's week?
good. It's been getting a bit cold here.
Awesome.
Yeah?
Like one day it was sunny, the next 2 days it's raining really bad.
Yeah.
Storms and stuff like that.
We've been getting a bit of rain as well, but Nishkara Bena, things are going well.
Yeah.
Oh, at least
Have
we're
you been
still
fed?
alive.
What have you been up to then?
Don't you reckon?
Say again? Sorry, I missed that.
At least we're still alive, eh?
Yeah, of course.
It's
Could be much worse. So, yeah,
a big one, eh?
yeah, 100% right. It could be much worse. What have you been getting up to?
Well, I myself, it's hell for me because I'm studying 24/7.
Yeah,
So
Isn't that everyone right now in uni?
yeah.
I'm never taking breaks.
Are
Although
you in
I'm not doing uni. I'm doing like a TAFE, but studying at
Oh.
home is actually doesn't allow me to take breaks at all.
Yeah, it's
Like,
challenging.
Whoa.
I do classes. I do classes when we like sign off with our teacher.
Yeah.
Straight away. I do my assessments. I never take a break from my assessments. There's lots of information to get done.
Like, is it like a daily thing?
Yeah, like
Mm.
until now, like so, like before I signed in with you.
Yeah.
Until now, I'm working on my assessments.
Really? Oh my gosh, you're a bit of Mike, bro. I'll tell you what, I don't miss those days.
Your commitment is really good. And you have
Yeah.
to say. It's better than mine.
For sure. Veronica, are you studying at the moment?
Yes, I'm studying chemistry and human bio, so I can teach both in high school. So I want to be a
yeah.
secondary school teacher.
Yeah,
Ooh.
beautiful.
Yeah, I really like it.
A bit of Mike.
Sometimes, thank you. I don't know. Maybe it will change.
Wait, Veronica, I have a question for you.
This is my first year.
No. It's a simple question.
Already, Fadi.
It's a simple
Okay.
question. It's a simple question.
Really not tricky, not anything in regards to human bio or chemistry.
No.
Okay, a truth. Okay.
Can you identify um dominant and recessive genes?
Dominant,
I knew you were gonna ask that. I knew you were gonna ask something like that.
dominant and recessive genes.
Really? You're very psychic.
I didn't know you were gonna ask something so specific like this, but I think we're gonna learn that tomorrow.
So do you
I
actually do
can teach
genetics?
you. That's very easy. Geno and phenotypes. It's really easy.
What are you studying? It's really
Me?
Yeah.
I'm studying community services. I learned that stuff in year
Wow.
10.
Most in year 10, 11, and 12, I pretty much hated human bio because my teacher was so boring that I slept in all of his classes. So I dropped out. But now I take it up again. Yeah. I don't know. How do you remember all of this from year 10? I barely remember.
Fadi's a bit of a genius.
Because I say to
Really
Mary,
spectacular.
go do biology in VCE, so you can have 3 kids. All doctors become a doctor. Doctors have 3 kids. Da 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 da. Psychiatrists, doctors have 3 kids. That's it.
Hey,
I
Jay,
just,
did you know the relics of Saint Mark is in Suva? Yeah. That's spectacular. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, neither do I. Mm.
So what do you study in community services? It sounds really interesting.
so in community services, there is a we cover a whole types of
Yeah.
things. We cover like family violence, domestic violence. We cover youth work, aged care.
Wow.
So these are the client. So these are the client.
You guys get?
What's it called? So these are the client. These are the client groups of community services. Yeah. So family violence, youth works. So youth groups, aged care, disability, and another and other types of
Like issues around that.
yeah,
Did
other
you know
types
That's
of
really
yesterday,
nice.
Freddie? Did you know yesterday was National Domestic and Family Violence Remembrance Day?
I never
It
follow
was
this
just
stuff.
it was just yesterday. Maddie, Jerome, what's up?
Hey, how are you, Sam?
How are you guys?
Oh, what was your first reaction when you saw Perth people coming into this chat?
To be honest, I wasn't really sure. Like I didn't think I'd get people from Perth and Sydney and Fiji and other people like dialing in. It's actually pretty cool.
Okay.
I knew a few people from Perth though. I know Abuna's brother-in-law George, and Skip was there for a while. Fadi and
Oh, you know Skip?
yeah,
Oh,
Skip and
I
Dina,
only
right?
I only met him in the SMOS.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah, and then a few of the other boys like Steve and them.
Mm.
So Jazz, Maria, how are you?
Hi, sorry, I'm driving, so I'll just be listening.
No stress, bro. You do you. Yes, Habibi. Boss baby. Oh my goodness.
Hi, Claire.
Say hello. Come up here. Say hello.
Hi, baby.
Hey.
Hi, you're so cute.
Yeah, so wild. So hi guys.
Hi.
Hi guys.
Baby.
Boss baby. Yeah.
Yeah. You love that movie?
Want the book?
You're a boss baby, Claire.
Yeah, but don't move the
Oh,
pages.
she's
Get
so...
into these pages.
Baba, do you want the book?
Yeah. Say bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, love you. Yeah.
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 Baby.
Yeah, go watch my.
Look at all her hair. She looks
Sam,
so hair.
So,
I just don't
okay,
think
yeah.
I don't think you should have another kid because one, nothing will ever happen like this again. So then you won't love your kid.
Well, like just now, like even if just me and Joyce are hugging, she would come between us and like say, no, daddy, mommy, me. I'm gonna die when we have the next one. Really doesn't
She's
happen.
so
What's up,
cute.
Medna? And who else we got? Cassie, John, what's up?
Hi everyone.
Blah.
Hi, Cassie.
Jessie, I haven't seen you in ages,
Cute.
man.
I know.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Right, let's get started, hey?
دقيقة فتحت مكانا. Sorry.
Right, we'll start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. My Lord Jesus Christ, we thank you, Lord, for bringing us together. We ask you, Lord, that you feed our souls and spirits with the heavenly fruit and with the heavenly food, that we may have our thirst quenched, that we may be able to have you revealed in us and see that what you want us to do. We ask you this through the prayers of St. Mary, St. Bishop, St. Philomena, all the saints, serious when we pray, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil, through Jesus Christ our Lord. For his kingdom, down the glory forever and ever. Amen. Okay, guys, thanks for joining. Let me get my Bible out. Today we are going to be going over 1 Timothy chapters 3 and 4. So we're continuing on our study of 1 Timothy. And last week we saw that with the different roles of women and men, okay? Here we saw that St. Paul was directing Timothy to say, let women learn the scriptures, not like before where they weren't allowed to learn. Make sure that they learn. And he was talking about submission. So making sure that when we come to learn, that we come with an empty plate, that we're coming to get filled, not that we're coming to provide, but we're coming to take, okay? And this was a very good foundation for this next chapter, 1 Timothy chapter 3, because now he talks about specific roles in the church. He talks about bishops and deacons in chapter 3, and then number 4, in chapter 4, he tackles the specific problems that were up in Ephesus at the time, okay? So we'll read chapter 3, and then there will be some references to chapter 4, so we may like jump ahead like at a certain time, okay? So let's all read chapter 3 together. So a bit smaller chapters this time, around 16 verses, so maybe we'll read 4 verses each, if that's okay? Yeah? So this is 1 Timothy chapter 3, and Fadi, I might get you to start if that's okay, Habibi?
Sure.
Okay, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen.
This is a faithful saying. If a man desires a position of a bishop, he desires a good work. Bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, tempted, sober-minded, good behavior, hospitable, to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not converts.
Mm-hmm.
One who rules his own house, while having his children in submission, will all reverence.
Reverence, perfect, thank you. Jasmine?
For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Not a novice, lest being puffed up with the pride he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony amongst who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Likewise, deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, not given too much wine, not greedy for money. Therefore,
Myrna?
Holding the mystery of the faith with a pure conscience, but let these also first be tested, then let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses as well.
Perfect. Cassie?
But those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith which is in Christ Jesus. These things I write to you, though I hope to come to you shortly. But if I am delayed, I write so that you may know how you ought to conduct yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth. And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen by angels, preached among the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up in glory.
Perfect. Glory be to God forever. Amen. All right. So here we see there are clear directions of a bishop and a deacon, and then he talks a bit more about conduct in the church. So for those who just joined, welcome. We're reading 1 Timothy chapter 3 and 4, okay? And we just read chapter 3. And it starts off by saying, this is a faithful saying, if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. It's important to note for here that Paul isn't talking about the power or authority of a bishop, but more so the submissiveness of a bishop in service, okay? Saint John Chrysostom talks about this in great length, and he talks about the bishop who desires a position is generally someone that wants to protect the doctrine of the church. Okay, and he continues to say that even if we look at Moses, okay, who didn't want authority, he didn't want power, all he wanted to do was serve the Lord, okay, and follow him. Even Moses himself was abused by his people, saying, hey, like, who are you to have authority over me? So St. John Chrysostom tries to like make this fine distinction to say here, St. Paul isn't talking about authority. He's not saying that if someone wants authority, it's a good thing. It's more so if you want to be able to protect the church, if you want to have a life of submission, then this desire is good and will be fruitful of good works. And then it continues to say, verses 2 and 3, a bishop then must be blameless, okay? Blameless being unspotted, being a good example for everyone. The husband of one wife. So back in the day, bishops were allowed to be married, okay? And the idea of bishops or presbyters not being married was first brought up in the Council of Nicaea. Okay, this was by Bishop Paphnutius of Luxor. It was actually a Coptic bishop that brought this idea up to the forefront. Now, the Eastern Orthodox churches, about the 7th century, that's when they adopted that bishops should be not married, okay? In the Catholic Church, they took it to the next level with the presbyters as well, not only the bishops, and that was brought up in about the 11th century, okay, and was adopted then. For the Coptic Church, it's kind of like slowly evolved from Nicaea. Okay, so the idea was planted in Nicaea. By the Council of Ephesus, it was kind of like the idea now that bishops should be not married. But it was like a slow evolution before we got to that, like that everyone then accepted it as the norm. So even by the Council of Ephesus, we still had bishops that were married, but newly ordained bishops wasn't really the case. Does that make sense? So then comes the question of a bishop then the husband of one wife. So what does it mean by that? The husband of one wife. Saint Basil and Saint Ambrose, they took this as it doesn't matter if you're a widower or whatever, you have one and it's one for life kind of thing. Okay, so it's not to say that bishops must be married, okay, because St. Paul himself wasn't married, neither was Timothy, okay, but it's to say if you are to choose someone that's married, they are to have only one wife. Okay. Now, St. Basil and St. Ambrose, they took that as once in their lifetime kind of thing. And the Coptic Church actually stands by that. But then it's not to say that like marriage is dishonorable, right? So if, for example, you are a widower, the church allows you to remarry, right? Only it doesn't allow for that for a secondary wife to have the authoritative. What's the word I'm looking for? The authority, the standing of a bishop. Okay. So this is the concept of the one wife. Now, the idea of the bishop being married, okay, if you remember last week we were talking about holy traditions, okay, and there's capital T and little t traditions. This is one of those little t traditions. It's something that was evolved over time that is not to do with the dogma. It's not to do with salvation or the belief, okay. A bishop must be male, okay, but the marriage thing is the little t tradition. The husband of one wife, temperate, so he holds self-restraint, sober-minded, he's sensible, composed, doesn't give in to anger easily, good behavior, not only blameless in virtue and belief, but also in the doings. He's a doer. A bishop must be a doer. He must have good works, good behavior. Hospitable. Can you put that down a little, Habibi? Hospitable. Why? Because it's a bishop's main role. One of their main roles was to take care of the widows, the orphans, the travelers, okay, deal with disputes, okay. So they needed to have, sorry?
No, I said anything.
Oh, sorry. There must be a bit. Yeah, and Romans chapter 12 talks more about this, about the requirement of a bishop to be hospitable, being in that nature where they're dealing with disputes. They need to have a soft heart, and part of having a soft heart is being merciful and being hospitable to one another. Okay. And finally, able to teach. This able to teach one is actually quite important, because it was the bishop's role, like I said, to protect the doctrine, which means when people come with false teachings, like what they did in Ephesus, St. Paul's basically saying, you need to stand up here, okay? And as bishop, it's your role to make sure that you set the line straight. And he talks about this again in chapter 4. In the Didache, do you guys know what the Didache is? All right,
that's
so
like the
is a collection of writings of the disciples. Okay, so we've got the Gospels and the Acts, which talks about like what the apostles did, and then they also wrote a book known as the Didache, which talks about things like baptism, and it says like if you haven't got, like, you should go for full immersion, but if you don't have full immersion, go for running water. If you don't have running water, go for this. Like it sets like these things about how they used to run the church. And one of the things that they've got in there is talking about teaching in the church. And it says, satisfy your congregation and quench their thirst from the light of the Lamb. So which is talking about the Holy Scriptures. And so the disciples, through Christ, are given this requirement to spread the word and to teach the truthful doctrine, right? The gospel. So what that means is, for someone brought to that position, there are certain talents and certain characteristics that should be looked at, okay? And it continues on to talk about a few more of these characteristics. So it says not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous. Okay. St. Gregory of Nyssa, he talks about these concepts, right? And he says, what the master is, that's what the disciple becomes. Okay? So he's saying if the master doesn't give himself to wine, he's then leading by example for his congregation. If the master is not greedy, then he also plants that idea, that seed of non-greediness into his congregation because he's leading by example. Okay. Gentleness and not quarrelsome. Again, this kind of goes hand in hand with that hospitable and good behavior and temperate, like he kind of reinforced these characteristics. And the reason why is because the Jewish priests, okay, in Leviticus, it talks about that a priest should not be quarrelsome, okay, and must be gentle, okay, because they're the guys that are leading, that are being the mediator, that are in the New Testament fulfilling the sacraments, okay. So to be able to walk blameless, these are some of these characteristics that you need, okay. And he then continues to say, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence, okay. So if your bishop is going to be married, all right, or if your leader in the church is to be married, all right, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. Here we see the word submission come up again, okay. And it's not about authority like it wasn't in chapter 3. It's not about bringing someone down, but more so about having a spirit of service and a spirit of love, okay. And St. Paul actually continues this in chapter 4, talking about it further. So here, the submission that we're talking about here, having his children in submission, is more about being brought up in the faith with a loving heart and a heart that wants to serve. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? Okay. And St. Clement talks about this as well. He talks about if we are to have one body of Christ, okay, and the bishop is married to the church, okay, then the same way that a wife submits to the husband, the bishop submits to Christ, okay, and submits to the service. And he said about the home thing, he was saying that for outsiders, for people outside the church, how do they look in and say, we can follow this guy if his house is in disrepute? And that's true, right? Like if you saw someone and their family's mess, okay, and then they're trying to teach you something which goes against what he's actually showing you in his household, you're like, well, what's this guy doing? What's he talking about? True. I can't tell you, stay clean, and then right behind me, you see all my laundry, right? So like it is basically saying here, lead by example. Whatever you do, that's what you're supposed to teach. And that's why if you're called to this order, you better bring your best game, because this is what you're judged against. And he continues to then say in verse 6, not a novice, okay? It should not be someone as a beginner in the faith, lest being puffed up with pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. This verse kind of jumped out at me, and it's something that's very close to my heart, because I see this in our service, okay, and as the servants are around us. It's very easy for us to be puffed up, okay, in service, and get a big head in service, okay, especially when we haven't been under the guidance of someone else, okay. So when we're a novice, when we're just starting up service, and maybe I've got a certain talent, I'm really good at the gab, right? I can really talk my mouth off. and I can keep people's attention. But if I let this get to my head, okay, that's the fall in the same condemnation as the devil, that I'm thinking that I'm better, right? And I end up through self-righteousness condemning myself. So it's very important in service, when we're serving, especially with others, that we really have to take a step back and have a heart of submission. Okay? Understand that we're working as part of a team. Okay? We're all trying to achieve the same thing, salvation. Okay? And we all have to work with each other to get to that same goal. Now, what that might mean is, if I know the right way, but someone has taken the wrong path, and when I say the wrong path, I mean like it's not the same service idea that I had, all right? But if they're going along with it and it's working, if that means that I need to humble myself and take a step back, I do that. And likewise, the other way around, if I'm going in a direction and someone brings it up to me to say, hey, this shouldn't be the way we're doing it, we should maybe think of it this way, again, I should humble myself and accept that. Okay, so it goes both ways. And you have to understand that we're all trying to do this as part of a team. And so here, where it says, not a novice, lest being puffed up with pride, okay, that's that first half. But then the second half, we can't also be puffed up with pride and not accept someone's criticism, right? We've got to be able to accept people's criticism. Jerome, did anyone catch the name of the bishop? It was Bishop Paphnutios of Luxor.
Thank you.
So a novice not less being puffed up. Another thing about that is when we enter service, we have to understand that the word servant itself has kind of changed over the years. Okay, and for some reason now when someone hears the word servant, okay, they think in their mind teacher. That's not the case. Or they think position. That's not the case. Okay, if I'm a servant, okay, what's a servant to a master? That's the lowest thing, right? If I'm a servant to someone, they own me, right? Isn't that what a servant is? Okay, and so when we hear the word servant, we can't think of this idea that I'm a teacher. And if someone says, Yanni, if I get criticized, I can't tell them, who are you to tell me this? I'm a servant. You know what I mean? That's talking like I'm the master. I'm not. Okay, as the servant, all you're doing is fulfilling the will of God, okay? Trying to get people to salvation, okay? And serving their needs. So if someone needs you to be humble, be humble. If someone needs love, be love to them. Show them that. Give them that. Okay? Wholeheartedly. And that's why verse 7 talks about he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest they fall into reproach and snare the devil. What that's talking about is when a priest, like for example, if a priest is being chosen now in our church, right? All right, and he's from St. Bishoy's church, then they'll ask the St. Bishoy's people, hey, what's the history of this guy and what do you guys think of him? Okay, but the investigation doesn't stop there. They also go outside and they think, okay, so what do you guys think? What do you guys think? So, and the idea behind that is, all my mates, they're going to talk well of me, right? But the people who have no connection of me, that's where you're going to get a bit more truth, right? Have good testimony among those who are outside. St. Paul's talking about, speak to the Gentiles about this. Okay, not only the people that are in the church, but speak to the people outside, because when they get ordained, if these little things come up that you don't know of, that's when they're going to fall into reproach. The devil is going to work on these problems, okay, and he's going to make it come out in a bad way to destroy the church. So he's saying, hey, when someone's going to be given a place of authority, check into them, okay, and make sure that you're choosing right, so that when they stand to be blameless, they can truly be blameless in front of others. Now, what that means for us is, if we're going to be servants or deacons or conducting any service, or really just carrying the name Christian as you're walking around in today's society, okay, the idea of having good testimony amongst others, what do you think that means?
Have a good reputation.
A good reputation.
Outside.
In what way?
In your actions, in your doings, in how you carry yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be a hypocrite.
Don't be a hypocrite, yeah.
Mm.
Let me even take it a step further, though. And Joe's mentioned this already behind me. I'm not sure if you heard it. Representing Christ, or being an ambassador for Christ. Okay. Let me ask you this. Like, everything you just said is 100% right, Jazz. But what separates that from a non-believer who's a good citizen?
True.
Right?
Mm.
If we want to walk around and people want to know, hey, this guy comes, there's something special about this guy, and he's saying it's from his God, the only way that they can know that is if I'm shining Christ, right?
Mm.
And what that means is not shying away from him. Okay? If we're going to have to be an ambassador, all right, like if you've got like the King of Spain coming in, before him comes his ambassador and he says, behold, the King of Spain is about to approach, right? So you all know who he belongs to. So don't shy away. Don't shy away. All right?
But the other thing also is that...
Come here, Mama.
If you're a servant, whatever you do also is for the glorification of God. That's how you're sort of representing yourself. Because if it's all for people to praise you, then you're representing yourself and not representing Christ as well. And that's a dangerous path to go down.
Did you guys hear that? So part of the idea of representing Christ as a servant, okay, is when you're serving, is to remember that it's for the glory of God, not for the glory of yourself. You're not looking for a pat on your back to say, good job, Sam. Okay. And you're not looking for human recognition. Okay. But you're doing it for the glory of Rabbena. You're doing it for the glory of God. And that's part of that idea of being that novice. If I'm a starter upper, that wisdom may be not set in my heart yet. Okay. And it's a very simple trap to fall into. But if we're able to have a heart of humility, a heart of service, knowing that I'm not doing this for myself, but I'm doing it for God, what that means is, if the service is being able to be reached out to people and it's working, let it be. That means I have to take a step back. And the other way around, if I see that it's not working, right, have the guts to step in. Yeah? Okay, verse 8 now.
What is the matter?
Yes, Baba. Come verse, Habibi. Verse 8, likewise deacons must be reverent, not double-tongued, okay, not saying something and doing something else. Not given to much wine, not greedy for money, the same as our bishops and presbyters.
Wait, for the bishop, it said no wine. But for the deacon, it said not too much.
Good catch.
Is that on purpose or like?
What do you think
You
of
to pick that up, Jesse.
Yeah, no,
I just found it super weird.
You're 100% right. What do you think of that?
That in my mind, like in my non-educated mind, that just bishops are a lot more of a higher place, so they need to be better because they are like, you as a congregation, you'd look up to a bishop and be like, all right, well, he's not drinking, so I'm not gonna drink. But if I look at a deacon and be like, he's not drinking, I'd be like, all right, good job, I will. type of situation.
Let me. I was thinking the same thing, but then it kind of caught me off guard. Off guard. What did I say? Off guard. Sorry, off guard.
Of course.
Read chapter 5, verse 23. Okay, this is his same letter to Timothy. He then tells him, use a little wine for your stomach's sake and for your frequent infirmities.
Mm.
And Timothy was the bishop then. And so the idea behind this is in the church, okay, you've got your main orders, right? You've got your laity, which is your general congregation. You've got your priests or your presbyters, okay, and they're the ones that are leading per parish. You've got your presbyters, your episcopus, your bishops, and you've got your deacons, okay. So they're the four main orders. Now the idea is wine obviously not being bad, okay, because God created everything good. Okay. However, succumbing to wine is bad, okay, because you're fulfilling the lusts of the body. And so the reason why he talks about the bishops having no wine, okay, is that these are the people where he gave the characteristic of blameless. Okay, they need to be blameless. He actually continues on though for the deacons that they have to be found blameless as well. Okay,
yeah.
Let them first be tested and let them serve as deacons, being found blameless. And so the idea behind this is, when it comes to wine and drinking, St. Paul gave this command in chapter 5 to Timothy. He said, I know that you've got problems, okay, and wine is a partial, not cure, but it's a remedy for you. So don't offset yourself just because I gave you the command of don't drink wine. Okay, there are places and times for it, and he's not saying get drunk off it, but because of the pain and suffering that you're in, having a bit of wine to help your upset stomach, that's not sinful. Okay, and the same thing that is then brought to the deacon's attention. Not much wine here is the idea of don't succumb to to being a slave to alcohol, and don't get to the point where you are losing your temper and you're not sober minded, and you're getting into violence and quarrels, right? But rather holding the mystery of faith with a pure conscience. Okay, you can't hold the faith with a pure conscience. You can't if you are a drunkard and a rebel, right? So that's kind of like where the distinction comes around for that. What we can do though is look a little deeper into the no wine and some wine, because I think the church is very clear that the idea of succumbing to alcohol is sinful, but alcohol in itself is not. But we can look into it a bit more to understand for a bishop the concept of no wine completely. Does that come, like, for example, as like a Nazarene promise, similar to the thing of like not cutting your hair? Is it at that kind of level? We can look into that. Then it talks about the deacons' wives. Likewise, their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. And let deacons be the husbands of one wife, a similar concept as the bishop, ruling their children and their own house as well. For those who have served well as deacons, obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness. Okay. So again, the way that Yusuf talks about it. Like, why does he bring the wives into this? Yeah, like if they're a bishop and we're all our own person, or I'm a deacon and we're all our own people, why does he bring the story of the wives into this? And there are two arguments for this. Amber Yusuf looks at it from the personal perspective. So if I've got a slanderous wife, I've got a wife that gossips and talks crap about people, it's going to make it very difficult for me to serve these people and give them crap to, right? If my wife is not faithful, okay, and the bishop's direction is to be faithful to one another, how am I meant to lead by example if within my own household I can't hold this? If my wife is not reverent, all right, and is causing quarrels at home, how am I meant to concentrate and serve adequately with these other problems in my life? Okay. Not greedy. Okay, the same idea. And so I think Paul in his wisdom, he's saying, okay, when you're married, okay, what used to be like small problems for you when you're single, now that you're married, now these problems become bigger. They don't disappear, they don't become smaller. So if you're going to be a deacon, okay, and if you're choosing a wife, then these are things that you should be looking for. And if I am to be a deacon, these are things that I should be doing. Because as a deacon, I'm choosing a life of service. Okay, it's a calling to a life of service. It's one of the first steps towards priesthood. Okay, and that's why it leads. That's why we need to be tested. Let them serve as deacons, being found blameless, to be able to go into higher callings of service. Okay, but where the wife comes into it better is about how it's done at home, right? If I'm having troubles at home, how am I meant to be able to also serve outside? If I've got a supportive wife, okay, a wife that is God-fearing, okay, everything that it talks about in the last chapter of Proverbs, then that works as a foundation, actually, as a rock that I can depend on, okay, and more so someone that can serve together, okay, a powerhouse. For those who have served well as deacons, obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith, which is Christ Jesus. I think, because in the Orthodox Church, we promote the idea of deacons being ordained at such a young age. It's a huge blessing, but at the same time, we lose the value and the reverence of what it actually means to be a deacon. Being able to stand in the presence of God in the altar while the mysteries are being partaken of is such a holy and reverent and unbelievable gift that we're able to participate in. Being able to stand in front of the altar as soldiers protecting the throne is not a service that should be taken lightly or should be looked at as insignificant in our eyes. Okay? Deacons, obviously, back in those days, they had a bit more responsibilities as well. Christianity being attacked, it was one of their jobs to stand watch over the church. Okay? For non-believers, they were the ones that would direct them that after the creed, they would leave the church. Okay? They would be supporters of the priests and the bishops. They would be missionaries, the same way that Deaconess Phoebe was, okay, and was able to take St. Paul's letters across all of Rome. And so obviously the role of a deacon has kind of evolved over time as living in the Western world, and we don't have these persecutions that we need to deal with. However, in saying that, the reverence and the holiness of the order has not gone. Okay, and it's still through the ordination through a bishop where we are able to partake in this. And so I want to stress particularly to the guys listening today, not to take your deaconship as just something that you put a 20 on. You don't just wear your holy garments, okay? You're numbered as the angels in heaven when you're standing in the altar. And when you're chanting, okay, the glorifications of the Lord, okay, we're numbered with the angels. When we're serving others, we should be leading as the examples. We should be blameless. We should be having a pure conscience, not double-tongued. These are specific directions for us. Okay? So if you've got your Bibles, please underline these, highlight them, write them, stick them up on your wall, because that's your calling. If you've been ordained, that's the calling of the kind of life of service that you've been called for. Now, I'm calling out the guys, but girls as well. Okay? Just because you haven't got the title of deacon doesn't mean that as a servant, that is like not the same standard that you're held against. Okay, if we're serving in church at any capacity, that means people are looking at us. Okay, and they're looking at us to see how should I be living, and whether you like it or not, the younger generations are looking at us, the older generations, and saying what they're doing, that's what I'm going to be doing. So these guys went clubbing, why the hell am I not going to go clubbing? You see what I'm saying? Jose is taking it from another perspective as an older sibling, okay? As an older member in the church, okay? Even if you're not serving, but just being present as an older person, the younger ones are going to be looking at us. And so these are the same directions that we must take, because inadvertently or maybe not as direct, but as indirect, we are serving. Okay. Any questions so far?
Sorry, Sam, just one out of curiosity. In verse 9, because when I saw holding the mystery of the faith, I was thinking, like, as you said before, like the mysteries is in like communion. Could it also be referring to that? Or is that just more so because like that, like full rank deacons had that responsibility as well, right? To share the blood.
Yeah.
Or is that just more so faith?
Actually, back then it wasn't only the blood. It used to be the body. In fact, the body at the start was actually given to people in their hand, you know? So that's how it was done in the early church. In the early church, when they would pray the mass was about 30 minutes long, okay? And they, as part of it, they would break the body and pass it on to each other, okay? And that's how they'd have the body. By I think the 6th century or 8th century, there were 20 different types of masses. Okay, and so they said, oh, hold on, this is getting a bit out of hand, let's standardize this. And so they chose one that was directed to the Father, one directed to the Son, and they kept St. Cyril, St. Mark's, okay, with the Coptic Church. So that's the reason why we now have 3. Here, you're right, Luke, the verse here is actually talking about the partaking of the body and blood of Christ, the holy mysteries. That's what this verse talks about with the mystery of the faith. That's that particular mystery.
Thank you.
Any other questions so far?
Yeah, Sam, I was just wondering quickly, I think it was in verse, I think you were referring to earlier, one of the bishops was saying that the bishops were asked not to partake of wine just to, like as a role model sort of thing for the congregation. Why then, if like you're saying like deacons are supposed to be role models for like the congregation, or at least they were, or at least they are supposed to be, why did St. Paul sort of like permit them to be able to take at least to a little bit of wine if they're supposed to be role models to the congregation and the bishop role model to the priest?
Yeah, that was Jasmine's question as well. So this is, I haven't got a full answer for you, but I promise I'm going to look into it. I can tell you that the church's stance is this, that alcohol is not bad, okay, because God created everything good. However, succumbing to it is obviously sinful, okay, because we're fulfilling the lust of the flesh. Now, the reason why he said no wine for the bishop, but some wine for the deacons, let me look into that more, because I don't know if that's due to like old, not prophecies, but fulfillments of promises to the law. So I don't know if that's where the relation is coming from. Let me look into that more about like why it's no versus some.
Sam,
We'll get back
could
to
I
that.
just make a quick comment on the responsibility thing that you stated? So I think when you said that, you know, older people are looking at you, younger people are looking at you, I definitely agree with that. But I think that also, I think what I've learned is that it can't sap the joy out of service as well. It can't sap the fun and the love which you have for the service in general. So you can't just like totally take on all the responsibility and feel like everything's, you know, on you. Because then it does start to kind of eat at you and then eat at others.
Thanks for adding that. Let me give you a nice story. When I early on joined service, okay, and I was serving primary school at the time. We took the kids on an excursion, and like there were like different foods and stuff there for the kids, but one of the kids wanted macarona, and so I went and bought him a pasta. Okay, I brought him back. Everyone was happy. Brought him back to the church. Everyone was having a great time, and a mother ripped into me that I only gave their children pasta, that I didn't give them any lahma to eat. All right, like what the other kids did get. Okay. And did that suck the joy out of it? Absolutely it did. But on the flip side though, what I quickly learned is the devil is very cunning. And when you start to do things for the glory of God, he starts to put these stumbling blocks in your path, okay, that wants to either like put out the flame that's going in on you, like, because you know how like when you're energetic and something about, like you're really excited about a certain service, and then you get these like funny comments or funny roadblocks, and you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Why are you doing this? You know, and it kind of like puts a damper on it, and you're like, I don't even want to do this anymore, kind of thing. What I learned very early on is the devil is very cunning and will work on people's weaknesses to get not only them down, but also get you down. Okay, so it's very hard when we're faced with these problems, because you're right, you don't want to suck the joy out of it, and you don't want the joy sucked out of service, especially from others. But on the flip side, it's important to understand that this isn't necessarily coming from that person. It's the devil uses their weakness to try to disrupt it. Okay, the devil will do whatever he can to destroy the chance of people coming to God, okay, and repenting and coming back to him. And so it's important in those situations that if you find that things are getting more serious in your service, where prayer needs to be ramped up, okay, don't underestimate the power of prayer. It's definitely one of the stronger points that the devil absolutely hates. The thing that I always love when I think about the power of prayer is Baba Krolos used to always say, it's through prayer, through the prayer of our monks, that the earth keeps turning. And I love that concept, the idea that through through someone else's prayers a problem can be fixed. You know, that God has the power and the wisdom to work through other people's prayers. And so don't ever underestimate the power of prayer in service. Okay, it's something that has to be on the forefront of everyone's minds. The second thing is when we're faced with these kind of problems, if it comes from within ourselves, then you're right. You have to like find that joy again, because service shouldn't be a chore. In saying that, service shouldn't be easy either. Okay. I was speaking with Abuna Shnuda about the Mass. One time I was praying a Saturday Mass with him a long time ago. And by the end of it, I was absolutely wrecked. I don't know why. I was so tired. And I go to Abuna, you want a coffee? He goes, absolutely. I go, I don't know why, but I'm feeling so tired. He goes, it's because this time you were praying. Praying is something that takes it out of you. And that took me, and yeah, and I'm like, holy crap, you're right. Like, it's because I was focusing, okay, and because I was so like in the prayer, you know, that it was so tiring on me. And that's an effect that service and prayer and fasting has on you. Okay. And so like there's one thing about like yeah, it should be joyful, but the other side, it should also be a struggle. Okay. And Saint Paul talks about it in many times, and same with Christ himself, about purification through struggle. Okay. So it's when we're tested and when we're faced with these hardships and we're still able to persevere, that's where purification happens and growth of the virtues happen.
How do you know that the like non-enjoyment is coming from within you though, or from the devil?
So the devil will work on it from two ways, either for you or through others. Okay. So Joseph is saying, take strength through earlier examples like the apostles and the saints. That's one way of looking at it. So for example, like the example that's coming to my mind is Saint Bishoy. Okay. Saint Bishoy in prayer. We all heard the story of how he tied his hair up, yeah, so he could pray throughout the whole night. Does that sound fun to you? Does that sound easy to you? That sounds terrible. All right? But it's because of his perseverance that he was able to get to that level. Now, whether it comes from you or the devil, that's actually a great question. How to tell if it's from you or for the devil? The easiest way to test this is to try to catch the lie. If there's a lie present, then it's most likely from the devil. If there's no lie present, then it's probably from my own laziness.
What do you mean by the lie?
So this is what I mean by the lie. The devil is able to deceive us always through a lie. Okay, it always starts off with a lie. So when it talks about testing the spirit, all right, the easiest way that I found this is look for the lie. So here's an example. I get an invite to go out, all right? And I know that there's going to be drinking there. I know that there's going to be a whole lot of messy things that my eyes shouldn't be looking at, okay? Now, I try to tell myself, right, but I'm only going to be doing this once. It's for a bucks night or a birthday party. It's just one night. I'll confess about it after. Not a big deal. Okay. Now, this idea behind it's not a big deal, that lie there, that's like if I'm like thinking of my thoughts, okay, and I think back and I think I was convincing myself by saying it's not a big deal. Hold on, that's a lie.
You're just justifying it.
Okay, so that thought there, not a big deal, that's most likely the devil planting that idea that it's not a big idea in my head. Now, another way, though, let's say if I've got a lustful desire, okay, and I tell myself, I do this because I get pleasure from it, and I'm going to confess about it later. Okay. There may not be a lie in anything that I just said there. And that could be then my own lustful desires coming through, and the devil didn't even have anything to play with that. I'm so in depth with my sin that the devil doesn't even need to let me trip up. I trip up myself. Okay. Another example of this may be smoking. Okay. So, like the two examples that I'm using there are kind of like addictive behaviors. There are other things in play, which doesn't necessarily have to be born from a lie.
What about in service though? Like, for example, I'm not enjoying service, or I don't want to serve because I'm scared of ABC, or like, I think this service is ABC, so I don't want to be involved. Like, I feel like it's harder to identify when it's not involving something that we know is a sin. Do you know what I mean?
Sort of. I get the idea of scared. If you're scared to partake in a service, like for example, I always hear this whenever I tell people, "Hey, you should join Sunday school." They're like, "Nah, like I don't know anything. How am I meant to teach someone, or how am I meant to serve someone? I don't know anything."
Before they'll look up to you, kind of thing.
Sorry, say that again.
Like the whole concept of like they're gonna look up to you, so serve with like as a role model.
I'll be perfectly honest. There is no point in my service where I feel confident.
Okay, that's
Are you uncomfortable right now?
Even right now. And Abuna,
This is a safe space. It's okay.
A safe space. Thank you, Baba. Abuna always pushed me into service for ages, and it took me a long time to be able to like heed the calling. I guess like the concept of fear though, and fear in particular, if that's the thing that's stopping you, that could be from the devil. It's hard to test that one. However, when it comes to fear, it's the thing that kind of gets me going is when God says, "Don't be afraid" all the time.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if I've shared this with you before. You know how many times like that sentence, "Do not be afraid," comes up?
Isn't it like more than 300? Is it 365? One for every day? Yeah.
One for every day.
What? Yeah.
Isn't that unbelievable? So,
None of that.
So this idea of fear, that like it paralyzes us, and it lets us not experience what God wants us to, because every day he's telling us, "Don't be afraid, I've got you." Okay, that's why in Acts, when before they received the Holy Spirit, he said, "Hey, when the Spirit comes, don't worry, I'm going to put whatever you need on your tongue. Don't worry about it. I've got you." You know, that's why when they were scared in Mark's room, the first thing he said, peace be upon you, don't be afraid." Okay, you're scared here now. Let me tell you, now you're going to be going out. Don't be scared. I've got you. And you're going to be persecuted, and there's going to be horrible things that happen to you, but that's not the point. The point is the glorification of my name. So that's specifically with fear. Sometimes the devil can plant fear in us as well.
Yeah.
But it could be maybe a false fear. So what do you guys think? Do you guys have any experience or comments about that? About like maybe false fears in service?
I mean, well, sometimes I think that in service they think it's more of a duty that they have to do it. So you don't see any love, or they don't show love of doing the service. So it seems like it's a chore. So it's like you're trapped, kind of thing. And now if I'm like in discipleship, that's what I'm scared to be in the same trap as them, or as others, not blaming anyone or pointing things at anyone. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
In terms of Myrna's question, I think it's actually really interesting because I kind of obviously went through something like that recently. And what I found useful was actually watching Father Anthony Messer's talk series on God's will and God's will for your life. And basically he outlined 3 different kinds of God's will within your life. So he said there's like the macro will, which is like God's sovereign will over the world. And then there's like, and so that's he kind of alluded to that being like a, like the MCG. And then there's the personal will of God, which is like the football goals, essentially. And then there's like there's the back half and your half, which is like, where God wants you to be, where he wants you to be playing. And so kind of I worked through that. And essentially I kind of like outlined a couple of things where I thought God was telling me certain things personally, and on a macro level, things that had happened in the environment that I was in. And from those 2 kind of analysis, I decided to make a few decisions. So I found that really useful.
Wait, can you share that video or that thing, what you watched? Or at the website?
Sure. I'll find the link and I'll send it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments with that one before we continue?
I've got actually a good question.
Yeah.
My question overall, like, why did the church actually forbid the marriage for monks in general, or individuals who are deciding to become monks, if there was actually in the past marriage for those bishops in the past, like as we were before, if bishops were actually to get married, if you want to actually become a bishop in the past, you need to be married.
Yeah. So St. Paul actually talks about this. It's not that monks aren't allowed to get married. It's that monks, nuns, people sworn to virginity, there's a higher calling for these type of people, right? So it's for people that actually get married. They call themselves bridegrooms of Christ. Okay. For these people where they also they die to the world. Okay, so like for example, for a monk's prayer, okay, they actually pray a funeral prayer on that person because they say, I'm dead to the world, I'm now solely devoted to God. Okay, so it's not that these people are not allowed, but more so these people choose that lifestyle as a higher calling than what the average you and I can do. Get me?
Let's see. So when did this actually get decided? So like, I know you mentioned the Council of Nicaea, but like, when did this actually get stopped?
Yeah, so it happened around the 5th or 6th century for the Coptic Church, for the bishops.
Oh,
the idea was planted at Nicaea, and then it took a few more, I think close to 100 or 200 years before it was chosen.
Let's see.
Hello, baby. Yes. Okay. And then the last bit of chapter 3 now. Come have it. Oh, you can read with me. So these things I write to you, though I hope to come to you shortly. So St. Paul was, before going to Ephesus, he was actually in Greece at this time. He was in Corinth. But if I'm delayed, I write to you so that you may know how you ought to conduct yourselves in the house of God, which is the church of the living God. So here, we see that the word of God of Timothy here, it's an inspired word of God. That's why he wrote these things. And the church is this pillar and ground of truth. But it's a beautiful thing that St. Paul was able to write these letters, and thank God that he was, because as you can see, all his writings take half of the New Testament. So it's because of his writings and that inspired word that we are able to then share that word to the world. This kind of, again, jumped out to me and it kind of gave me an importance of writing down things. Okay, it's an important thing in your own spiritual life, growing your own spiritual life. Start practicing. You're tired, Baba. She's tired, Mama. It's important to write things down yourself, okay? And having your own journal for your quiet time to start writing things down, okay? Favorite verses, maybe favorite contemplations, readings of other holy books, how verses link to other verses. Start writing things down. It's very, very important. Don't write it this one. The reason why, not like, for sure it's for your own growth, okay? And here St. Paul wasn't thinking that this letter was going to last 3,000 years later, all right? Or 2,000 years later after he wrote it, all right? That wasn't his intention, all right? But it's how God uses it. Okay, so for sure it helps St. Paul in his ministry, okay, and his service to give these writings to Timothy, his friend, but it also like strengthened his heart, but also helped Timothy and then help the rest of the church. So to help your heart, don't make sure that you start using the pen. Get a pen and paper, write things down, underline. I was never a Bible underliner or a highlighter. Okay, I definitely use a paper and pen and write things down here, and I underline some key verses. But start practicing, all right, writing things down. And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. What is this great mystery about? God was manifest in the flesh. Okay, so here God took on our flesh, okay, justified in the spirit. Yani, he took mankind who was in sin and brought us to holiness again, okay, because he took on our nature and was sinless. Seen by the angels prior to incarnation, they saw this mystery happen in front of them. Preached among the Gentiles that Christ went out and ministered to the people and did all the miracles. Believed on in the world and received up in glory. Believed that now the disciples and the apostles are going out to preach and received up in glory through his ascension. Okay, so this beautiful poem that Paul finishes this chapter on, it is basically the story of incarnation and the story of salvation, right? I know that we've gone over time already, so we might actually not tackle chapter 4. Did you guys want to continue? I'll leave it to you. We can do chapter 4 next week. I feel bad every time I do. Yeah, I'll do chapter 4 next week. I feel bad that every time I take up like 2-3 hours.
It's fine.
I think this chapter is very important because it asks like a lot of important questions for anyone serving.
Yeah. I think like, if we're to take away anything from today, it's really about this idea of what it means for us to be servants, and how should we behave as servants? How should we work with others? How do we tackle problems? How do we deal with love? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about love and knowing that love is for the glorification of God, not for the glorification of ourselves.
So, sorry, Sam, got a question.
Oh.
Because like sometimes like you'll do a service and you feel like you're benefiting a lot from the service, but sometimes like as you said, you might experience pushback or experience criticism that might you like, but like let's just say like that criticism comes from like, you know, maybe someone higher or someone who has a bit more authority. Like how do you kind of reconcile that?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. I've had a lot of items that fall under that bucket list.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that I use. This is my own personal thing that I use. I tell myself, Abuna was chosen for this calling, not me. Okay. So there's a wisdom that God's put in him that I will not understand with these kind of decisions. Okay. And it might be that God's saying the time is not now, but it might come up later again. It might be that, hey, if you go down this path, it might lead you down the wrong path later on with self-righteousness. I don't actually know. But what I tell myself is that even though I can blatantly see in my eyes that it's the wrong decision, okay, I tell myself, hey, at the end of the day, I wasn't the one chosen for this calling, teaching. I know that doesn't really give much solace.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the thing that I tell myself.
Yeah.
When it comes from a priest or a bishop, there are two things that I generally run into. It's either a priest that has already an agenda in mind and they want to fulfill that, or maybe it's that they don't have all of the facts yet, and when they're provided that, then they're able to make a more educated decision. Leah, you're killing me, bro. Is that funny? Yeah, so like as advice, what I would suggest you do is if you're having this come up with a priest or a bishop, then make sure that you provide all the facts to them, so then they can make the call. And if they stick to their decision, they stick to it. If they choose to go a different path because now they've got all the facts, then so be it as well.
I also feel like with service, especially when it's regarding criticism, it's like, obviously, apart from the cases where you obviously know someone has an agenda, but I'm speaking more generally, like if it's coming from someone who's higher than you, I feel like sometimes like I personally just try to like tell myself that they know better because they've been doing it for longer, and they could be seeing something that I'm not seeing. So just kind of just making excuses and like trying to take it as a learning opportunity rather than a personal like attack. That's kind of how I bounce back from it, because it's like at the end of the day, like Sam said, it's not really about us, it's about who we're serving. But obviously like there are exceptions where like things seem a bit more personal, but for the most part I feel like with service it's never really personal.
One other thing that I would bring to your mind is that part of service is obedience, and not a part of it, a big part of it. All right. Again, if I'm talking about a servant master, okay. Yes, baby. Yeah, baby. The same way as a servant to a master, where they have to obey even though they don't like they may not like what orders come their way. Okay. That's true submission, right? So the same way that Christ submitted to the Father to say, may this cup be taken from me, but your will be done, right? It is a similar thing of what we need to take on with service. It needs to be an obedience. Bye-bye. It needs to be an obedience where, and I'm not saying so much as blind, Not blind obedience, but faithful obedience. Have faith that God is choosing the right path. Okay? It's more important to be obedient than to be right. Get that one in your mind. And that was one that I've learned a while back as well. It's more important to be obedient than to be right. Because what shines more love in that scenario, right? And that's what people remember. They don't remember what's right or wrong. They remember how they're treated. They remember the respect that you gave.
I have another question, sorry.
Yeah.
When it comes to choosing a service, I know that, like, obviously, like, we've been told to speak to Abuna, like, use your talents, stuff like that. But with regards to, like, trying it out, per se, for lack of a better word, is that all right? Like, can you sit in and, like, if you don't think you can do it or if you don't like it, like, not do it?
Absolutely, why not?
Because isn't it like you're not willing to try hard to be good just because you didn't like it when you sat in like once or twice? Do you know, like, yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with trying to see where your niche is. Okay? If your niche is in ministry, let it be in ministry. If your niche is in cooking, let it be in cooking. If it's in cleaning, let it be in cleaning. If it's in visitations, let it be in visitations. If it's about loving your neighbor, let it love your neighbor. About picking, Abuna Mina used to always say, you guys would remember this from St. Bishoy's, even if you pick up a piece of paper that's from outside and put it in the bin, that's your service. It doesn't matter. You find what works for you and you run with it. You find what works for you and you run with it. And what you'll see, what you'll find is that you won't usually just be one thing for your whole life.
Yeah.
Start down one thing and then you'll see God calls you in a different direction and then God calls you to another direction and you just follow. You obey. I started off doing Coptic for primary school. And then I moved to primary school. Then I moved to secondary school. Then I moved to youth. Then it turned into ministry. And then it turned to Bible studies and youth meetings and shut up air and who knows what's got in the future. But you just follow where he tells you to go.
What if you're good at something but you don't enjoy it?
You can't know unless you try though.
What if you do it and you're good at it but you don't enjoy it?
It's like me and physio. That's in my history now, mate.
But that goes back to like the discussion we were having before regarding if service is meant to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying I completely understand and agree with the hardness factor. I don't think it should be easy, and I don't have a problem with hardness. I have a problem with like enjoying it, like as in wanting to do it.
Well, this would be my challenge to you then, because there's no way you're going to know that unless you try it, and not only try it, but stick with it for a while.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And if you're good at something, but you're not really enjoying it, it doesn't matter. God still works through you.
Yeah.
Okay. Until he calls you to your next thing. I promise you though, if you're getting this calling, if you're getting this feeling and this push and people are talking to say you should do this, don't let your fear stop you from taking that plunge. Yes, Habib. Don't let fear stop you from taking that plunge. You jump.
Don't let your insecurities get the best of you.
Yeah, absolutely. You jump and you watch God split the Red Sea. That's what happened.
Ooh. Spit fire. That was fire. That was so good.
Write that one down.
I like that. That was so poetic. Love your work.
But that's what happens truly. And when you join service, God does things in your life and works in your heart like you never thought could be possible. And it pushes you to be better. It pushes you to be better because now it's in your mind, I have to lead by example. I can't do this stuff that I used to.
What if you stuff up? Like, what if your example lead someone astray, like for the worst case scenario.
You look at I do this on a daily. That's going to happen.
It's a massive responsibility though. Like, wouldn't you rather take it if you feel like you're ready, or like you feel like you won't let?
I feel like there's never gonna be a point when you're ready.
When are you gonna be ready?
There's never,
I think,
but
sorry, just going off that as well, like I think if we're waiting until like we're ready, or we're waiting until like, oh, but what if we make a mistake? I think then we're putting the service all on our hands, and all of it is in our control. When it's God's service, we're just kind of his, I don't know what the word for it is, we're kind of his way of kind of fulfilling his work and fulfilling his duty. So I think as long as we're able to stand before God at the end and say, I did your service with all my heart as much as I could, then you've done your bit. And he'll take that, because like Christ's service himself, Christ's own service and his own mission, he wasn't able to convert everyone, for example. So but he obviously served purely and perfectly. So as long as we try and serve as best as we can, then shouldn't kind of worry too much about, but what if I make a mistake? Or you are going to make mistakes, we're all human.
I think it was also similar to saying to yourself, oh, when I become a good person, when I stop this sin, I will confess about it.
Yeah.
It's like in other things. So once you give like excuses to yourself and like the small things, it will come to the big things like service. So that's how I think.
I asked that question to Abba Myrna, your brother.
Yeah.
When I was like, before I joined Sunday school, I was like, oh, I just don't know. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna answer their questions. Like, these kids are gonna ask me questions that I don't even know. I ask them myself, and he said to me that he has that happen to him a lot, but sometimes what just happens is like someone asks him a question and he doesn't know the answer, but his mouth is moving in a way that like he doesn't even know how, and the answer's just coming out. So I think if you feel like you're not ready, God is. So
yeah, that's true. We have a question in the chat saying, is obedience also important with this matter? If a Abuna asks you to do something, should we just listen to him?
Is obedience also important with this matter? Yeah. So that's kind of like what we were talking about before.
Like try it out, I think,
like
and then make your decision.
So it kind of goes, it goes kind of like different parts. The way that I was talking about it before was, if I've got an idea and to do something, I go to Abuna and say, hey, we should be doing this. And Abuna shuts it down and says, no, we're going to be doing this. That's the way that I was kind of talking about it. But if you're looking at it from a service perspective, if Abuna says, just do it this way, yeah, it's like what you do is you present the facts to Abuna. Then it's up to him to make that choice. And when he chooses, whatever, even if it goes against you, rather than arguing back, yeah, it's more important to then take that line of obedience. There's nothing wrong with standing up for what's right. Let me just put it down. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to like the right way in your mind versus obedience, now, before, if you asked me at the start of my service, I'd say no, it's what's in my mind, because like I'm younger and I connect better with the kids and I know what works and blah blah blah. But now that I've got a bit more I guess experience under my belt, and I've been able to serve with people who are champions in service, I can now see that the obedience always trumps that, no matter what, because God works through that. God works through your obedience.
What if
I really liked, sorry, Jerome, I really like what Mon said though about like being able to stand up in front of the just judge and say, I took on this service and I did it with all my heart and I did the very best I can. That Merna, when you're trying out new things, make sure you're trying it out with the best of your ability.
Yeah, okay.
Like don't go, half in, half out. Like if you're going to do it, go in, go hard, and if it's for you, God will tell you, and if it's not, He'll tell you.
Okay.
Jerome, you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question. What if, like, it comes to the fact, like, a woman tells you something, it's like not what you would have wanted, but you decide, you're obedient to him, and then it comes, down the line, like maybe a couple of months, couple of days, couple of years, or whatnot, and it turns out like he's wrong. What can we do then? Like, do we just continue to trust in him because he is like God's messenger? Like, I was just thinking, like, I know it's a bit far-fetched, but like even Nestorius in the Council of Ephesus, like he was an archbishop and he got excommunicated.
Yep.
Like what? Like I just imagine like what would go through the people's minds, like if they were listening to him and like they like realize this guy's just got excommunicated, everything he said.
So this is what I would say to you. Remember how I said I don't call it blind obedience, but faithful obedience. Right? Obviously, you don't follow Abuna if he's telling you something against doctrine. Okay? So if Abuna says, hey, I don't know, go kill this guy, obviously I'm not going to go do that. Right? Just to get out of obedience. And what I would say about that example that you gave about Nestorius, okay, the idea behind false doctrine, okay, I wouldn't obey just because of the sake of obedience there, because it's going against doctrine. Because you started off by saying, do you follow Abuna, and then down the track you find out it's wrong, do you trust him again? The answer is yes. The reason why is because Abuna is not sinless, he's still a man. All right? And the same with your friends and your family. Sometimes they do wrong by you, okay? And you require to go through a process of forgiveness, okay? And whether you felt betrayed or whether you felt, I don't know, hurt by him in some way, there are obviously different cases where you need to weigh up, like, is this what I'm going to, like, forgiveness should always be the end game. But for example, if a priest, as a wild example, takes your confession and says it to someone else, okay, would I then go and confess to that same priest again? Probably not. But is my intention that I should be able to forgive him? Yeah, it is. Does that make sense? So I hope that answers your question. I know that I kind of left it up in the air a bit, but the idea is you don't blindly follow a priest. You have to make sure that it's in good faith and good conscience, so that it's following doctrine and you're following. It's not going against what Christ's teachings are. The second thing would be then is if the priest did lead you down the wrong path for whatever reason, okay, it's okay, because God still gets good things out of that situation, okay? And you have to go through your own grieving process and your forgiveness process, but you should always end in forgiveness. Because if we can't forgive, how does God forgive us, right? So that should always be our end game. It's extremely difficult to do. And it's something that's been testing me lately, the concept of making sure that we always end in forgiveness. It is sometimes a lot more challenging, but it's something that we're called to do, because when we're standing in front of our Lord, like asking for mercy, that's the only thing that we've got going for us, right? So that would be my advice with that one.
Thank you. It's not like I've experienced that sort of thing before. Like, the Lord has done me wrong, I'm not going to trust in him. But like thankfully that's never happened. I was just wondering. But
sometimes it could, Yeah. Sometimes it could. And at the end of the day, Abuna is a man like you and I, and he's human like you and I, and he's got his own pitfalls like you and I, and priests can sometimes be wrong, and that's okay. That's not saying that Christ is wrong. It's not saying that that the teachings of the church are wrong. It's just that this person had a moment in weakness, and the same way that I succumbed to the devil, he succumbed to the devil, and that's okay. These things will happen. We just need to be able to make that distinction that this is the person, it's not the church. And that's what people with this novice kind of faith, or not a deep faith, or not a deep foundation, where if a Buddha does them wrong, they leave the church to say, hey, if this is what the church is going to be like, I don't want a part of it.
Yeah.
That's what makes it a bit hard. For our role in that, so I've got a lot of friends where that's happened to. Our role in that is not to push them into the church, but it's more so about helping them heal and showing them love, and let God work through that love to bring them back. But not so much as, oh, this was just the priest and the human. No one gives a bar of that kind of justification.
Yeah.
It's better to be a friend than a loving friend, and bring them to God that way, than trying to push doctrine down someone's throat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I was just, because it was actually a friend. He a different denomination. He I think something happened to like his friend's uncle or something, and it was by, I think, a pastor in a Catholic church. And turns out like the pastor gave him some bad advice, and like domino effect like fell on some happened. So I was just wondering, I know it's a different denomination, so it's not directly related to us, but it's just something.
But it's 100% relevant, man.
Yeah.
It's 100% relevant.
It happens a lot. Lots of people get put off or like offended when they personally experience following advice and it backfiring. And
I've got a lot of my close friends who were given terrible advice from people. Terrible advice. It happens. All right? It happens. But,
they're human.
Hey?
They're human. That's just what I always keep telling myself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're there to do God's work, but at the end of the day, they're human, they've got their own weakness. So,
just to, because it seems like, would it be correct in saying then that, like, rather than, like, if you think something that they're saying is wrong to us, like, rather than saying you're human in that instance, it's more so like when once, like, the consequence has happened. Is that like, do you get what I mean? But
are you trying to say, are you meant to wait for the consequence to happen or speak up before?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're having double thoughts, there's nothing wrong with asking for another opinion from another priest or a bishop. There's nothing wrong with that. However,
like in your car, get
let me finish this sentence, because I know someone's gonna rip into this one. You know, just because you've got an answer in your mind, you don't go fishing for your answer either. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no problem with looking for a second opinion or a third opinion or even a fourth opinion. But if you're looking for your answer, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Her hair is something else, Sammy. You gotta tame that.
No,
let it be.
This is who she is.
No, I'm just saying, put some product in it. It will look nice.
Product? She's like
once in her
3.
hair.
Okay, relax.
Advocate.
If you want your kids to look like,
we put oil in
I would love my kid to look like that.
She's beautiful. Her hair is goals.
And then, like,
It's actually part of
Goals and
her
a half.
female type, actually.
Careful, baby.
I'm gonna cut my hair like that.
we were not doing that.
We braid her hair, but then when we tie it up, she hates it tied up, so she like pulls it off, and then so it goes into.
You're so cute. I'm just saying, a little bit of styling, you'll be set.
You styled your hair once. You think you're some sort of style queen.
I'm sorry. I just realized that, you know, if you can tame the mane, it's going to look great.
Are you starting
23 years later.
Yeah, literally.
Say, Mona, you cannot talk.
Well, I tame it now. I
Yeah.
try. Let's not talk about
Exactly,
that.
after 100 years.
Mine is up here.
Yeah, so you learn from other
Let's
people.
move on, guys. Let's move on, guys. Thank
Sam,
Yes, Abigail.
I've actually got two questions in one.
Sure.
What was the causality of cancelling the marriage for bishops at that time, if there was actually a foundation for marrying for bishops then?
Yeah. Good question. So are you saying, like, what's the reason why they came up with this, or more so, what was the outcome after they made this decision? Like, because when you say the cause, it's not really a cause that happened. It's more so during the conversations at Nicaea, they were speaking about lots of things. They spoke about they spoke about the Trinity. They spoke about how bishops should be. They spoke about, like, the Easter dates and how it should be calculated. They spoke about lots of things at the Council of Nicaea. And one of these ideas that came out was that leaders of the church should not be married. Okay, all leaders, including priests. Okay.
Why did that change then?
Hey.
How come that changed?
Yeah.
You can't be a priest.
Because this kind of stuff is tradition little t, not tradition capital T.
Gotcha.
Okay. So depending on the ecumenical councils, where you get all the church leaders together and they look at doctrine and they look at history and they look at customs and they look at everything, and then they make decisions. So we spoke about, for example, previously about the role of women in churches, right? And like previously there were deaconesses and now there aren't, but now men and women are separated, right? Before it wasn't. Now it's coming back together again slowly. There are things that happen. Hey?
Coming back together where? Men and women.
Like I was giving an example. I attended a church in the US where.
And wherever.
Oh yeah, you were telling us about that last week.
Yeah, and it was actually really beautiful, and it's something.
Can we do that here?
We do it in weddings.
We can do it here. It depends on the parish if the congregation want to do it. And if they're happy with that, then they would take it up with their priests and with the bishop, and they get the okay from them. And that's it.
We should do that.
Yay.
Is marrying different denominations little t?
But that's little t traditions. The thing with the bishops is, again, a little t tradition. It's got nothing to do with dogma. It's got nothing to do with salvation. Okay. But it's to do with the tradition of the church. Okay. Before the Council of Nicaea, they were getting married. After the Council of Nicaea, bishops were still being ordained married. All right, but then a couple of 100 years later, that's when they said, okay, our priests are going to stay married, but our bishops are not. Okay, in the 7th century, that's when the Eastern Orthodox churches. So that's after we've already split off. The Eastern Orthodox churches, they then took that on as a decision in the 7th century. And then the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, they went down the line of non-marriage for their presbyters in about the 11th century.
Is marrying different denominations also little t?
Believe it or not, it's that's the biggest question at the moment, and it's a combination. I'm actually trying to get an answer for someone about this at the moment.
I feel like the implication of marrying is big T, like communion, baptism, blah, blah, blah.
So it's little t based on capital T. That's what it is. So, for example, there's a church in Alexandria which has gotten permission that the Copts and Greek Orthodox people are allowed to get married. Specifically in that one church in Alexandria, they've been given permission. Claire, you're killing me, man. What's going on? want to press all the buttons. A church in Alexandria has been given that permission because of the high number of Greeks in that city, in Alexandria. They said, okay, we're going to allow Copts and Greeks to marry each other without baptism, without chrismation. We're going to allow it. Okay. It's only in that church at the moment. So the fact that it's allowed somewhere means that it's a little T tradition. However, it's based on the concept that when you're married, you become one flesh, and the one flesh cannot be divided. A kingdom that is divided against itself cannot stand. So there's a capital T tradition that it's based on. Are you recording Claire as we're doing? Yeah, I thought so. You got to see her. She's actually like Supermaning across the table and tapping every button on the keyboard. Yeah, and you're laughing at her, aren't you?
She's so cute. I can't.
So is it little tree tradition? Yes, but there are a lot of factors with capital T's that need to be addressed.
Gotcha.
The problem is there are no, like you ask a priest something, they'll give you an answer. You ask another priest, they'll give you a different answer. That's the problem in our church at the moment. We just need to have one set of rules and everyone follows that one set of rules. It's kind of like up to whatever priest you.
Can't the Holy Synod just have a meeting and let us know?
Just need to let it go.
Let it go, Sam. Let it go.
Once you go to bed, bro.
I love how you call her bro. Marina?
Yeah?
Continue what you were saying.
Oh, I just said, like, can't the Holy Synod just have a meeting and let us know? Like, it's their authority.
I believe that's how it would work, but...
You can't, like, not call, but you can't request.
So I'm literally in the middle of helping someone get these answers, like literally right now.
Well, I would put a request for, like, put it on the Synod's agenda.
Can you do something and we'll all sign a petition and then it'll start a movement?
You just all want to marry people from different denominations.
No, what that petition will do.
I'm happy with our denomination, to be honest.
Pressure to bring.
I think we should expand. Huh?
So again, like the reason why it's the bishop's choice, okay, is because they've been given that authority and wisdom to be able to deal with church disputes
and defend the faith, which we read today.
Right. So it wasn't that because this church asked for it, they got it. It's not how it works. Right? There are a lot of circumstances and factors that were brought into it and a lot of discussions over lots of many years to get to that point. Like it's not something that, hey, I want to do this and yep, get the ticks of approval and it's done, you know? But we have to start somewhere, right? So at least, what are the rules now that exist? Let's at least start there.
Well, isn't it a rule that you can marry in the Coptic church first, follow in the less important denominations?
I don't think that's a rule. I think that Abuna just kind of like pretends he doesn't know anything about it.
Abuna Shnoda said it's the Coptic Orthodox is blinded.
No, they turn a blind eye, is what he said. Yeah. That's all right. I'm happy with that. There you go.
Nope, it's a no for me.
But you need to be Greek. You know, you need to be baptized under Greek if you want to marry a Greek person. That's what he's trying to say when he's.
No, it's the opposite, Fadi. Greeks don't care what we are, but we care what they are.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. We can be extra like that. Class.
Nah,
look, I don't. I'm rich. I'm honestly neutral to this topic. I don't mind. Bring more. Don't bring more. Be happy. That's all I care.
I just want every denomination to not even be a thing anymore. Just one church for last.
But sometimes some people don't believe in like the Trinity, for example.
Yeah, I know, but like I feel like with all of our Orthodox churches, like what's the difference?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if your dogma is the same, that's fine. But there are lots of people that their dogma is not the same.
Yeah, I know, but like that's kind of more like distant. But why is it not? Why is nothing happening with the churches that we're close to?
I don't know. Ask the synod.
There's a lot of
There's something called allyship. You know,
there's a
like
lot of
when a country
We don't need
helps
allies. We just need
helps
one
the
body
country in war.
under
no,
Christ.
there's a lot of history that kind of comes with that question, and that like, and unfortunately keeps playing into it. You know, like, why did you venerate this saint? We don't recognize this saint. We don't recognize this point of view, and it's all very like when we're talking about like at least between the Orthodox churches, like Oriental to Eastern, it's so like the difference is so tiny that, you know, recently like they, you know, just only starting to realize that it's really, we've really only been blinded by bad history, right? So it's just the unfortunate consequence, but like, but like the like, you know, the spirit that we're all sharing here, which is this desire for unity, right? I think that says a lot, and like that's what we kind of need going forward.
Right, completely right, Luke.
Yeah.
Love that. Very well said.
I'm gonna go. I have dinner waiting downstairs, but thanks, guys.
No problems. Catch you, Habibi.
Thanks, Sammy.
Pray quickly.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Let's have a mixed like
Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. No Lord, for his kingdom come, and glory forever. Amen. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sam. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop you.
Thanks, Sam.
I was just saying goodbye.
For the last hour.
Mona, didn't you eat
Thanks,
already?
guys.
I'm hungry again. Classic. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Guys, thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Sam.